Actually have a special guest who is joining us here on the stream. David Bieri from Virginia Tech University has joined us to talk about the conflict in the Middle East, the war in Iran, and some of the impacts that we're seeing here at home in the United States. David, thanks so much for taking a little bit of time to give us some insight here. How is everything with you on this Wednesday?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Can't complain. Beautiful weather here in Blacksburg. Just finished teaching. Pleased to be with you.
Wonderful. And I know I am a Virginia Tech grad myself, so I know that in Blacksburg, coming out of that sort of February, early March timeframe can be a lot of relief to see that sunshine kind of having a real impact. So that's great to
Very much
hear. We
so.
can see it out the window there a little bit. Now let's kind of dive into this here, and let's start with gas prices, those impacts that Americans are feeling in a real tangible way. I filled up my tank on Tuesday, and it was a noticeable difference. We've been over it quite a bit when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz and the 20% of global oil that comes through that particular water passageway, the difficulties that we've encountered geopolitically with reopening that during this war. Is there any other aspect of this that deserves an elevated level of attention as to why those gas prices are so high and the oil industry is seeing prices so elevated outside of the Strait of Hormuz being closed?
But really, the answer is no. There are no prizes for guessing. The only question is the order of magnitude. I mean, in total, we are seeing, as I'm sure your viewers have heard repeated time and time again, that this is the largest oil shock in history. Now, the only thing that we can do is go back in history and sort of see what that might mean for gas prices at home, and so on. We're not quite there yet. I mean, only in 2022 we saw 450 at the pump. So there is still a little uh, hopefulness in there, which doesn't mean that our budgets aren't already much more strained than they perhaps were in 2022. But beyond that, petroleum is a global commodity. It's priced at on international markets, and markets have reacted as they always do to supply constraints and geopolitical uncertainty. And so, with Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, it was geopolitical uncertainty, not supply constraints themselves, that actually drove markets. So it's difficult to see how that ends well, and perhaps we can to have a moment or two to talk about the consequences at home beyond simply the pinch that we're feeling.
Of course, please. We can absolutely go there next. If you would please give your summary of those real tangible consequences we're feeling besides the prices at the pump.
Well, it is with price increases in general. America runs on petroleum, whether it's diesel, whether it's air fuel, gasoline for cars. So our transportation industry relies on petroleum, and that means price impacts in that industry will be felt throughout the economic system. And this is exactly what happened in 73 and 79, and later points in our more recent history. And so that means inflation will be baked in to a variety of processes, and we're already seeing the first signs of it this weekend. The Cleveland Fed's specialized research unit called Nowcast, Inflation Research Unit, has released its first estimates of where inflation is going to head in March. And it's already significantly up month on month compared to February. We will recall that the Federal Reserve at its meeting last week, at the FOMC meeting last week, sort of viewed this shock as of a temporary nature. This is the true test of the resilience of the American economy, to see what will happen with those spikes in energy costs that are there, that are real, in the next few months.
So a test of the American economy is an interesting way to phrase it. I guess, as you said, guesswork is kind of a difficult thing to implement here in an efficient way. But if you had to sort of try to map out how America will do on that test, what are main indicators that you're looking for, and how do you think we'll fare?
Well, we have two indicators as economists. One of them is the past. We can sort of abstract and see how similar shocks or different situations, how the American economy has fared. And then we have our own ways of modeling things going into the future. And that combined gives us predictive capacity or capabilities. In the case of looking back, America's economy over the last 10 years has actually proved to be the most resilient economy in the advanced industrialized world. We came out of COVID stronger than anybody else. Now, in part, that had to do to some extent with the very problem that we're faced now with, and that is pent-up inflation due to the highly effective programs of the Biden administration. And so that always comes, it's a bit of good news and bad news at the same time. There is a view that these federal interventions, COVID-related interventions, have at least had some responsibility for bringing us inflation. And now we're at a point again where inflation is the key problem. Uh, the not so good news might be if we look to the past to see what can be done about inflation. The Fed over the last 2 years has been relatively gentle in terms of bringing inflation down towards its target at 2%, down from say, 8, 7%. But if we look at the 79 crisis, where Paul Volcker, then was chairman of the Fed, had to do something quite different, be much more aggressive in terms of hiking the Fed short-term rates up to 15, 20%. And that is an interest rate environment that was extraordinarily painful for Americans. It led to mortgage rates in the order of magnitude 18 to 20%. We're complaining at 650. We were so excited that the mortgage rates had dropped below 6%, but imagine 15, 18, 20% mortgage rates just to get inflation under control. We won't go there, I can assure your viewers, but we simply don't know how these things will play out. There have been worries about the softening of the labor market even before the intervention. And so in the short term, there'll be a lot more pain before we see additional gains.
And that labor market is something that we've seen changes in from reports to actuality. How does that impact how we try to navigate these situations when we are routinely seeing different numbers come through than were initially reported when it comes to employment?
Well, that can do two things. I mean, there is informational content in the surprises. There can be negative and positive surprises. I'm less worried about that than the actual numbers themselves. And there that we have just seen a softening in the labor market. Rates edging up. We have still the issue of a shrinking, in that sense, labor participation, because people have just not re-entered the labor market post-COVID. And so that gives us less rope to work with. And in that sense, that's the real concern. But the flip side of that is of course, that our economy still is surprisingly resilient. We've been waiting before the war in Iraq. We've been waiting or worrying about the recession for the last 2.5 years, and it hasn't materialized, despite all of us in the profession reading the tea leaves and extrapolating, and it hasn't come. And so this is the dimension of hope and hopefulness that I'm speaking to. But at the same time, the previous segment of your show pointed to another huge problem, and that is the fiscal mess that America has been in over the last, I want to say, 20 years, if not 25 years. And our refusal to address the fiscal side of it is as dangerous as the prospect of inflation.
Why that refusal? Why the way you describe it as a refusal, as if it is a abandonment of personal agency. Why does America continue to refuse to address what is clearly a problem?
Because of the mechanics of politics, and I'm going to break it up if we have the time to do it. I'm going to break it up, although I may have to. I don't want to, take too much of your time. In that sense, what is different now is that the our federal budget is structured in such a way that the American government has very little leeway in making spending decisions. In some ways, most of the money is already committed before to mandatory programs, from Medicaid to Social Security and so forth, before any discretionary investments can be made. And that is in large part because of legislation that has sort of accumulated since the Reagan era, shall we say, or at least certainly since the 86 Bush tax cuts. And so in that sense, what we're experiencing today is our collective unwillingness, in a bipartisan sense, to clean things up with a holistic approach that I would say under Reagan and Bush was implemented. And I think we saw with Clinton the last time that we had that type of willingness to tackle some of these problems. And that these are issues that everyday Americans might not necessarily see, but as tax season is coming up, for instance, those of us who are fortunate enough to be homeowners benefit from a very specific provision in the American tax code every year, and that's the mortgage interest deduction, right? That's a gift of the federal government to homeowners. It's a subsidy, and that costs the federal government a lot of money. And our tax code is riddled with these special provision and extra. They're in some ways legal loopholes, and I don't want to give the impression that this is anything negative. Not at all. It's perfectly legal to exploit them, but it costs us a lot of money, and it creates a gap in the budget that eventually takes us from worrying about going into federal bankruptcy, as we did two summers ago almost, to government shutdown after government shutdown after government shutdown, simply because we cannot make ends meet. And of course, in this particular shutdown, things are a little different because there is a rather strange, I think, game of politics being played for defunding agencies that are vital for the economy.
And that's something that we've talked about quite a bit on this show, is the increase in the number of government shutdowns. And it sounds like it's something you've observed as well. I want to go back to something you said originally as we were talking about gas prices, and you noted the long history of conflicts that have had these sort of impacts and how America has reacted. I'm wondering, with the how drastic we've seen the impacts be here at home when it comes to gas prices, knowing that we've been in these conflicts before and we had a template to work off of, understanding that there have been conflicting reports as to whether a closing of the Strait of Hormuz was even expected. Do you feel as though we entered into this conflict unprepared, and that is part of the reason why we're seeing these impacts, or was there simply no way to enter this conflict without these impacts?
That's a really difficult assessment. You see, as an economist, I can say, well, there are two considerations: those of national economic security and those of sort of global security. And sometimes you have to. All wars have an economic dimension to it. I mean, we would be very much mistaken not to think that the Napoleonic Wars, or even Caesar's wars, or the World War II, did not have economic dimensions to it. They were all about. In some ways, it's all about economics. In our case, the question of when to do it and how to do it is, of course, one. I would certainly not say that we weren't prepared. That would be, in some ways, foolishly arrogant of me to presume that I would know what levels of preparation by the most powerful army in the world would be. If I have quibbles over certain strategic issues, it may be so, but maybe even that strategy itself has a point, because we have to view this as a sequence of, in econ terms, games that is being played over particular types of horizons. And so in that sense, was it the optimal point to be doing it? Maybe not necessarily so, or the contrarian view could be it was precisely the right moment because America's economy is doing so well.
Hmm. And I want to, you bring up the Napoleonic Wars and World War II. I want to ask a question that on its face I feel like is maybe a little bit reductive, but in the past, a World War I, a World War II, I know that in my education on those wars, those were conflicts that spurred job growth in America. Now, it was a very different type of warfare and a different type of economy at
Mhm.
the time. We talk about how the labor market has been struggling. Could there be positive impacts on the labor market from the war itself?
I mean, in some ways, and I understand the structural differences, and I worry that we may run out of time or lose your users, your viewing public if we go into too many comparisons. But I agree with you. History is, of course, extraordinarily important in how we think about these things. This current engagement may have geopolitical similarities uh, with World War II, but certainly not with the larger rearrangement of the Western or Northern Hemisphere and the axis of evil. Um, Having said this, you point out something really important. In some ways, we tend to forget what this president's larger agenda was, which is to extract America from a multipolar, globalized system and to focus it uh, on itself. And in that sense, reducing external threats, increasing a form of splendid isolation is all consistent with that objective, including with tariffs. And so maybe at some other point we could bring all of these pieces together. I view it as a strategic puzzle piece of the current administration's larger plan. It's not as random as it seems if you read some of the MAGA documents in terms of what it is that we're trying to achieve here. First and foremost, as far as I can see, you mentioned World War II. America after World War II has become the lender to the globe. Our dollar is still the leading global currency, and we've had to incur certain costs for that exorbitant privilege, as some people say it. The Trump administration has said it's time to rethink that global order, and here are some very specific steps that will do. And tariffs are one of those, and there are many more that we don't have time to go into, uh, including a type of reorganization of the Middle East.
And when we talk about some of those impacts that we've seen here and the detriments on the economy, if the war were to end today, somehow, some way, we wake up tomorrow and the conflict is over, how long would it take our economy, and specifically when it comes to energy, for it to bounce back to sort of the healthier levels that we saw in the past?
It'll depend on how quickly essentially markets react. And we've seen that some signs, the first signs of the government peddling a 15-point plan with Iran has already helped um, uh, calm nerves a little bit. But of course, this is not going to be, if this is over in the 5 weeks that the president promised, it's not going to be another 5 weeks for the problem to go away. Because as we've seen with the most recent bout of inflation, these are very different lags, as economists call it. And it could be not for another year that we see the full impact gone.
Okay, so as we've said, it's something where we have to sort of read it as it goes to know specifically. And now, Professor, I feel like I could talk to you all day long here. We really appreciate you joining us on Live Impact News. We're going to have to let you go. We'd love to have you on again. This has been really insightful to get to listen to you kind of discuss some of these issues in more detail. So thanks for joining us today, and hopefully we can have you on Live Impact again, because I feel like I could have asked a dozen more questions just based off of each answer you gave. So we really appreciate it.
Wonderful. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of my ideas, and I'm grateful. Anytime, I'd be happy to be back. Now I have to prepare for another class before I head into the classroom.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hopefully you get to enjoy some of that Blacksburg warmth as well, and have a good class, Dr. Bieri. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, so a special treat for us here on Live Impact News. Anytime that we can get the opportunity to gain more insight into some of these issues that we discuss so frequently on our show here, it's really valuable for us. So